You're listening to the MBA Success Podcast, featuring a wide range of conversations with the best and brightest MBA alumni. I'm Ross Barclay, and together with our guests, we explore their past, understand how their MBA has helped them achieve their career goals, and gain insight into what success means for them. This podcast is a part of MBA Australasia, the professional body that promotes the standing and enhances the value of MBA qualifications throughout Australasia. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Lisa Pascoe. Lisa is a recent MBA graduate from Edith Cowan University and is a senior global IT manager for a Fortune 500 company, a global organization where she deftly aligns IT strategy with corporate objectives. With over 25 years experience supporting large organizations across engineering, resources, and government service industries, Lisa has a wealth of experience and knowledge to share with us today. Lisa, thanks very much for coming on an episode of the MBA Success Podcast. How are you going?
I'm great, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, pleasure. We've started a bit of a trend in the last couple of episodes of just delving a little bit into the background and the past of our guests. So I'd love to learn a little bit about, where you grew up and, where you're from.
Okay, so I currently live in Perth, but I actually grew up on the east coast of Australia in Sydney. And my family moved to Perth. I was mid-teens. I was in year 10 at school, so not the ideal time to sort of move. And came across to Perth and I guess really struggled from there, to be honest with you. I think for me, I went from private school education on the east coast of Australia, came across, there was no grounds to sort of get into a school here, mid-year, mid-term, it was my life was, as far as I was concerned, over, I'd lost every facet of my life, my friends and everything else. So landed at a public school in Perth. It was a great school. It just wasn't for me. So I sort of, I would say I was quite a rebellious student, to be honest with you. I had really good marks, but I did not want to be there. So I actually dropped out of school in year 10.
Yeah. And so what did you do after you've dropped out?
So I was, I'm going to say, forced by my parents to do something educational. So I went to TAFE and I did business. I hated every minute of it, which is interesting, especially where I've ended up. But yeah, I went to TAFE basically as a means to get out of the school system and used that to actually convince someone to employ me. It was interesting. I was actually at a friend's 18th birthday party, so it shows how old I was at the time. And I was talking to her father, who was looking for an office manager. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. How hard can it be? I can manage an office. I couldn't even type. So, I winged it. And that was really my first big break because I sort of took that role and sort of grew it and grew my career from there. That was my foundations.
I have to ask, as being somebody who went to two schools in my whole life, being the same primary school and then the same high school, I can't imagine what it's like to have that sort of chaotic experience of moving not only to a new school, but across the entire country, which, let's be honest, is basically like another continent. If you're living somewhere else, it's the distance is huge. What do you look back at that and, go, there's some experiences that I learned along the way that have really helped you to become who you are?
Look, at the time I thought, like I said, my life was over. Now when I look back, it was actually the best thing that happened to me. I think I was forced to grow up. I was forced to sort of step outside the cocoon of life that I had. I had a very privileged upbringing. I was very, basically had whatever I needed in life. And I think coming to Perth and going to a totally different environment and a different schooling altogether really made me, I guess I started to comprehend that the world wasn't wrapped up in gold leaf, and I think that was a really big thing for me. But interesting you say, Ross, I have two kids who are now they'll always be my babies, but they're 19.
Yep.
And they went to the same school from kindy all the way through to year 12. So
Wow.
I was determined that once they got to high school particularly, that they would not move to a different school, because I really don't think it was a good thing for me at the time. It didn't destroy me. In fact, it forced me to do other things. But I think for me it was not fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I can imagine just the experiences. Yeah, there's a lot to do there. So you ended up in a sort of an office management job. Did you have any particular interests while you were going through school? Like obviously before you moved, after you moved?
Yeah, so, okay, I laugh every time I say someone asks me this question, because I always wanted to be a teacher. My whole life when I went through school, I wanted to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I struggled with 2 children. I can't imagine how I would have dealt with 34 in a classroom at a time. But I do still have an interest in the educational growth of our next generation. That is something that I do really value, and I do a bit of voluntary work around that now. But at school, even though I sort of say I was rebellious and everything, I loved maths, I loved science, and then I loved those doing subjects like home economics and things like that. Interestingly, I hated IT the most. So to me, that was like my subject. Oh my gosh, I've got IT today, and yeah, here I've ended up working in IT. So I don't know what that is.
Yeah, interesting. So a bit more interested in the things, and I'll say that the research sort of says men are generally more interested in things and toys and that sort of thing, and women are generally tend towards the more human connected side of things. So would you say that's a bit of a different, you took a bit of a different slant there, like being that you wanted to do those home economics types of things, or?
Yeah, I would say my whole life I've been a very empathetic person, and I do sort of value human contact and, developing relationships and things, but I have always loved those subjects where you sort of tend to get in and do things rather than, nose in the book type study, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to assume that you crushed the office management job, but I'm curious as to know sort of how things unfolded after that. What trajectory did you go on?
So I did that role for about 7 years actually, and during that time I was gifted so many opportunities to sort of learning to get into quality auditing and things like that, and really just grasping every opportunity as it came. I ended up moving on from that role, and I've had a couple of jobs since, but now I've landed at a Fortune 500 company, and I've actually been here for 23 years, which is crazy when I say that out loud. And I've done 5 key roles in that time, and I think, for me it's been an amazing experience just to sort of work for a company that promotes internal growth and promotes opportunity, but I think also you have to be prepared to take the opportunities as they present, and sometimes put yourself out there a bit too, and that's sort of how I've ended up where I am in the senior management role.
Yeah, awesome. So like you said, you've been in the same company for 20 plus years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You recently, I think about 5 months ago, graduated from your MBA studies. How did that play out? You obviously weren't trying to make a career shift or change, for the reason you went and studied your MBA. What was the motivation for that?
Okay, so I think because for me, I always felt like I lacked a bit of confidence because I didn't have that university parchment. I mean, as I touched on before, I dropped out in year 10 at school, and I've done all sorts of, short courses along the way, a year or two, TAFE and other different institutions, but I didn't actually have a university parchment. And I always felt like I was judged because of that, or maybe it stood in my way. And I don't know if that was just me and my confidence thinking I don't have that. People are going to expect that for my next sort of role. So it had always been in the back of my mind to do something. I didn't really know what it was that I was going to do. And every time, I'm an overthinker, and every time I would think about or try to approach going and seeing what was out there to do, I would find an excuse. My kids were too busy at school, they needed me, my work was too busy, there was no way I could do this. And over time, I started talking to different people who were like, you should do an MBA. It's very wide, it's very broad. You can take some of your leadership knowledge and skills and sort of use them and grow them. And in fact, it was through my kids that I guess I really found the opportunity, and that is that we started going, when they were in year 10, we started going to some university open days. And heck, I made it all about me. I was the one asking all the questions, and I was out there trying to find what opportunities there were. And that really planted the seed for me. And that's how I sort of, I guess, learnt more about what an MBA would actually mean. It's one thing to talk to individuals who have done them, but I think to talk to the institutions and to see what different opportunities there are within the MBA, different specialty areas, things like that, that sort of, I guess, inspired me to do it. But I will say I was lacking so much confidence at that point in time that when I actually applied to do my MBA, I didn't think I'd get in. I can remember when I got the acceptance, I was like, oh my gosh, they actually want me to do this. Like, this is crazy. So, you know, I think, yeah, I would say to anyone who's, you know, looking at doing a postgraduate, an MBA is a great place to sort of to look.
And I guess, was there, when you were thinking about that, being inspired and seeing some possibilities, was there something that you were potentially manifesting or you know, abstracting as, you know, an outcome that might be possible from doing it? Obviously gaining some confidence, but, you know, what did that look like? And, you know, what was the outcome that you were looking for?
Yeah, so interesting. So I guess initially what I really wanted to do was to get the piece of paper. And at first, I think that was really my motivation. As I sort of entered the first unit, I would say I realised very quickly that there was a lot that I didn't know, and a lot that I would learn, and the knowledge that I would gain just, you know, it snowballed throughout the 2 years. The other thing that I was really keen to do was to expand my network. And I don't mean just from a business perspective, but also just from a, you know, a friendship perspective. I feel like moving to Perth, and I hope no one takes this as me criticising my parents, because I don't at all. I think it was the best thing that happened. But moving to Perth in my mid-teens, I didn't really develop a lot of true school friendships as such, because I'd sort of left some behind, and then I was only at school in Perth for, you know, less than a year before I pulled out. So I didn't develop those friendships. And then, you know, going on and having children, and I found that a lot of my friends were sort of their friends' parents and things like that. And I just really wanted to grow my network of touch points, if you like, outside of what I had. And for me, I thought the MBA and studying in general might be a way to sort of do that. So that was another driving force as well.
Yeah. And going in, you had a lot of business experience, and I'm assuming you were managing people for a long period through that.
Yeah.
Was there something that, you know, stuck out through the studies to say that, you know, what you were doing previously was good, maybe what you were doing previously could be improved? Was there anything you sort of had some light bulb moments there?
Look, the first light bulb moment for me came in my very first unit, which was what was that unit called? It was leadership unit. And I think for me, I felt like I was a great leader. I had a team of people who I had managed and had people wanted to come and work in my team, and they tended to stay as well, which was great. What I learnt, though, was really about being present for your team. That was the big light bulb moment for me. I've always been one to try and multitask, and I think one thing that I learned as part of that leadership lesson was to be present, and that was a really, really big light bulb moment for me. I'm trying. Yeah, I think
it's good. It's good. So were there things that you implemented there to make yourself be more present with your team?
100%. So I, with my team that I have, and it's the same team that I had when I started my MBA, none of them are based in Perth. So every single conversation that we have is over Teams or Zoom or something similar. So cameras on is always key. I have a team who obviously they're in different parts of the world, so it's different parts of the day and night. I stopped worrying about what I looked like at different times of the day and night when I got on a call with them. I figured it was better that they could see that I was there and present than, that I was dressed business-like if it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night for me. So, stop worrying about the little things. And I think that really grew the relationship with my team too, because they learned to relax on that as well. It ultimately it doesn't matter. Different if we've got clients on a call and things like that. But if it's just us, we meet how we meet, and that I think has been a really big thing for me. But camera on really does stop you from getting sidetracked, or an email comes in, you just quickly have a look and see what it is and things like that. So I think that's been a really important key thing for me.
Yeah. And so how long have you been managing remote teams for?
I've managed remote teams for about 17 years.
Wow.
I have had, so it's sort of, obviously COVID morphed things a little bit. But prior to that, I've always had teams of people that were initially based around Australia and then into the APAC region, so China, India, Jakarta, etc., Singapore. And then it sort of morphed into this global model. That's just through my positions as I've sort of worked my way through the business.
Yeah. And that absolutely fascinates me, given the difference in how we, went through COVID and just, that few years of what remote work looks like. What did it look like back 17 years ago? Was it phone calls mostly, emails? I don't think video calls were too much of a thing back then.
No, I can remember when we first brought in video calling, and it was like such a traumatic experience to get it set up in the boardroom, So, no, I think it was phone calls. There was a lot of phone calls, a lot of WebEx type video, not video, audio conferences,
Yep.
things like that. Obviously, life has got a lot easier. There was also a lot more travel then, so there was a lot more. Even just pre-COVID, there was so much, there was this belief that you needed to be on the ground with your team. And I think, whilst I think it's really important to sometimes have that face-to-face, if you can manage your team collaborations through Teams online and things like that, it actually can negate the need to travel anywhere near as much as what we used to. And I love that. I think, I can be more present for my team. And what interestingly, what happened with COVID was prior to COVID, my team was typically or pretty much based in 3 different geographical locations. And as the world shut down, they all went off and moved where they live and things like that. Now, it hasn't affected our output as a team, but for me to travel to one location now or 2 locations has not a lot of value because they've moved on and, people are everywhere. So I feel like that's been a real light bulb moment for me, is just that you actually don't need to be in a room with a person to communicate well with them.
Did you have roles in the past where you were managed remotely, or was this something that you kind of just, you got put in this role, you promoted or whatever into the role that you got in, and you had to kind of figure it out from there, or did you have some good leaders and some mentors that you could kind of take and pick up ideas from?
I've had some amazing leaders.
Yeah.
I've been really, really blessed throughout my whole working life with people who really have taken an interest and helped guide me. I have been managed remotely. I'm trying to think now. It would have to be at least 12 years. So I've had that situation myself where my manager is not based in my location or in my time zone, and it's never been a disadvantage to me. I'm determined to make sure that it's not a disadvantage to my team members either.
Yeah.
I think you have to put different processes in place and procedures when you are not on the ground with your team. I often say to my team that, if we were sitting in an office and you came in one day and you looked tired or you looked worn out or you had a little bit of a cold or something and you weren't quite yourself, I can see that if I'm sitting in the same office as you. If you're on a call, you can hide that. People don't know that. So that's where that communication and sometimes taking that time just to sort of ask a person how they are, ask them what happened on the weekend. You know, you don't want to pry. There's a level of, I guess, limit.
Mm-hmm.
But I empower my team to kind of whinge. And I say to them, look, if you've got a headache, tell me. You know, tell me what's going on. I wouldn't know if you had a broken leg because I can't see it, right? So I think it's just about opening up and making sure that they're comfortable sharing things like that as well. I think that helps.
I love that. It definitely sounds like relationships are key. And is that something that you make a point to form good relationships with your team on a bit of an individual level?
Yeah, look, I do. I definitely do. There is definitely a boundary that you have to make sure that both parties are willing to step over, if you like. I'm very motherly in my approach to leadership and management, and I do deeply care. One of the key things for me is around people's health and safety, making sure that people do feel empowered to look after their own self. And I think a lot of that, you need to understand what people are going through in life. I am that person that people will talk to, and I love that. And I also, but I'm very conscious that there's only some things that can be shared. You know, so I think it's just understanding the boundaries and recognizing that they're different from person to person as well. So some people are definitely more private than other people within the team, and that's absolutely fine. I just need to know what I need to know to make sure that they're comfortable and they're safe in their work environment and empowered to speak up if they need anything at all. And I think that's the key, is finding that touch point with each individual.
Yeah.
And, you know, interestingly, on that, I've got people in my team that I've never actually personally met. And yet we have fantastic relationships, you know, and I think if I look back even 17 years, I had people on my desktop team when I was managing a desktop team that I never met, and I managed them for years and years, and that was pre-COVID, you know, and I think you can do it and you can form those relationships and you can really have a bond that ultimately helps as a team you to grow and move forward and deliver what you need to deliver.
Yep.
It's respect. It's that form of respect that you have for each individual, and then ultimately they grow and have that respect for you as well.
Yep. You said you had the privilege of having some really good managers over that period of time, because we all know that there's a lot more bad ones than there are good ones. I'm just trying to think of the way to phrase this particular question, to not come across too badly. But you know, from your experience and what you see, you know, in workplaces, and not necessarily just your own, but in other organizations as well, you know, is that, and I guess when you talk to people, is there enough of that going around? You know, people actually showing a genuine care for their team members, because essentially I think it starts with that to a degree. If you don't care about your team, then you know you don't have too much of a hope of leading them anywhere positive, because you're not motivated to a degree. But yeah, I'm interested in your how you see that in a more broader spectrum.
Yeah, look, I think it's about sadly there are bad managers out there, and you know, I'm fortunate that I haven't experienced that myself. I've witnessed it, and I've witnessed it through even some of my friends who have sort of gone through some horrific things in their working lives. But I think it's, as an individual, it's about how you deal with that. So you're empowered as an individual who's a member of a team or reports to someone who's not a good manager to do something about it. You know, move on if that's what it takes. And sometimes it's taking those scary risks forward that we have to do. But I think for me, being a good manager is really about being personable, being empathetic, and not just to your team, but to the business that you're supporting. So whether that be an external client or internal clients, making sure that you treat them the same way you treat your team. I guess that for me is the big thing, you know, I mean, in my role now, our clients are internal, right? So we're all in this for the same purpose. We're all in here for the shareholders, and we're all in here to make a difference and to move forward. So I tend to not, I don't know. I mean, I've never had to micromanage a team. I've always had people who are enthusiastic, who are willing to go above and beyond. And I think that just comes about from that respect. And it's having that respect for the business, having that respect for their manager, and having that respect for each other in the team. And I think that's what drives it. I don't know how we fix the bad manager thing. And, you know, I also recognise, though, that every individual takes a different level of management to get through. So some people need to have a little bit more one-on-one management, and others absolutely resist it. And I think there's a book, and I can't remember who wrote it, which is really bad off the top of my head, but The Languages of Love book. And I think if you can take those languages of love and you can kind of adapt them to the working place as well, and what people actually need to be able to grow personally, and be that, you know, if it's words of affirmation or, you know, recognition and things like that, understand how each person that's within your team fits in. And that's key to sort of making sure that you're helping them to grow as well. I also have a theory that if someone's wants to be somewhere else, I will help them get there. So through promotion, through encouraging them, that's left me dry in the past, whereby I've actually had some brilliant members of my team move on to other positions and I've really helped them get there. But I would prefer to see them do that than to leave the company altogether, you know. So I think it's about recognising what people need.
Yeah, basically what'll give them the biggest dopamine hit to reinforce the good behavior.
100%.
Positive performance.
Yeah,
the children.
absolutely.
No, that's absolutely fascinating. There's a lot of gold in that. I really appreciate that answer. I think one of the steps to helping bad management is getting more people to do an MBA, personally. I think that would help a lot of people. It's not the be all and end all, and you certainly need to go in with the right attitude for an MBA, or at least change your attitude earlier on enough to get the
100%.
most out of it. Because you can go in and tick the boxes and still not walk out. I know, I'm not quite sure what it was like at ECU, but when I did mine, there was quite a bit of a emphasis early on to do some personal reflection and understand who you are as a person, so you can understand how you like to lead people, you know, because essentially how you show up, you know, matters half the equation when you're trying to, you know, influence a person or have a conversation or deal with a direct report. And there were quite a number of people who just weren't willing to make that, you know, uncomfortable introspection to go, who am I, you know, and actually, you know, open the door to see something that they might not want to see because they don't like the look of it. But I think that's a big part of what you need to do in order to get the most out of it.
It's really interesting, something you touched on there, Ross, because I think for me, I was looking for, as I mentioned before, that parchment at the end, right? And I think when I started, I kind of thought that it was just a process to get that parchment. And from the very start, like within 2 weeks, I realised I was actually going to learn something, which sounds really big-headed. But I felt like, you know, I was good at management. I've, you know, got a lot of lifetime experience, and this was really just to check the box for that bit of paper. And I think the minute that I had that realization that, you know, I'm going to get something out of this, it literally opened my mind to accept and I guess to grow. And I think that was really key. And I would encourage anyone who doesn't already have an MBA, if you are going to approach and get one, make sure you want to learn something, because the opportunities are there, be them through the actual formalised learning or some of the incidental learnings that come along. As you mentioned before, I went to ECU, and there, you know, the level of care and I guess support that their lecturers and their teams offer was amazing. And as much as you wanted to grow, you were I guess empowered to do so just through the way that they delivered their classes, and, you know, and the people that they have that work there. It's, you know, amazing.
Yeah, it's something that I still think, and this is literally one of the reasons why this podcast exists, is to help people who are interested or have done an MBA to just learn a little bit more about how people use it, what they got out of it, sort of the transformations that it's made. Because I still feel like in Australia, a lot of people don't have that understanding of what they can learn through the MBA. It is just like, oh, well, cool, you got an MBA. And like, I don't actually understand what that means. And I think what we're trying to do at MBA Australasia is to help lift up that standard to say, these are all the things that you learn and these are all the amazing things that people go on and do with an MBA, because it can be fairly transformational for a lot of people as part of that. So it's,
Yeah, I think it really does give you a snippet of all parts of business and things that you might never actually do yourself. So an interesting one for me was marketing. So marketing was one of the units, and I thought, well, I don't actually care about marketing. Not an area of interest for me at all. But I actually developed a lot of skills from my marketing unit that I was able to apply to all different areas, even just in the way I presented things. Different tools to use, things like that. So I think I personally went into marketing unit thinking, well, what's the point of this? This is ridiculous. And I got so much out of it. And I think it's just recognizing that you get an understanding for what other people in an organization might be doing and how you can actually help them to succeed. And I think that's the other thing that came out of the MBA for me in a lot of areas was just really recognizing the different things that people are doing. There were some areas that I learned and I thought, well, I know what that is now, and I know that going forward, wherever I end up, I need to make sure I can always have someone else do that side of work for me because I hated it. But, I had the understanding of what they need and I'm able to sort of help them going forward. And I think too, like I know some institutions offer specializations within an MBA, and I would encourage people not to pick their specialization up front and to sort of start their core subjects first and then figure out what areas, not necessarily where you are already, because most people that do an MBA are already in sort of a leadership or a management role.
Yeah.
I would say try and find something that is going to help grow you further and pick that as your specialisation if you are going down the path of specialisation. So, that to me was another thing too. I didn't do my specialisation until 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah, there you go. So I think that's a great idea. As you were talking there, the one thing that it made me think about is it provides you an ability to be even more empathetic to other parts of the business, because to your point, you actually have a greater understanding of what it is that these people do. And given, if you're going to be sitting there and you're working with another team and they've got a job on their plate, you have no idea what that business can do or how it actually operates. You kind of just go, well, what's taking them so long? Whereas if you can put yourself in their shoes and go, well, I mean, I don't know exactly what it's like, but having done some of those assignments and learnt the theories around it, I can understand that it's actually probably challenging to do X, Y, and Z. So I think given how important empathy is in a lot of business these days, I think that is a really interesting insight from there.
Yeah, and I think it also gives you the knowledge what tools you need to give other people to help you. And that for me was a really big thing, thing to learn.
I like that.
It also enables you to sit at a boardroom table and know a little bit more about what the hell's going on when some people use some key terms. So
yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, you mentioned that you didn't particularly have much of an interest in IT. How did you end up in IT?
So I started in procurement and an opportunity came up. We were replacing a full fleet of equipment in Australia from an IT perspective. So I actually took on that role to manage that, and that was my path for IT, and I've never really looked back. I am still not a technical person as such. So, I know the difference between a keyboard and a mouse, but if you put me in a server room and said the server's broken, go fix it, I'd be like, yeah, no, that's not happening. Switch it on and off again. That's about the limit of my knowledge. But what I love about IT is the fact that it is 2 days are never the same. So as the world churns and keeps turning, we are constantly changing the things that we're doing. There's different aspects of IT and the touch points. So, from security and this, you've just got to open a newspaper today and see that there's cybersecurity risks and things like that. The world of AI is incredible now. So, as a managing or working within IT is an area that what today looks like, it's not going to look like that tomorrow, right? So it's about agility and adapting and things like that. And that sort of that transformational sort of role in management is about making sure that what the world is offering in the way of IT, we're able to deliver to our business colleagues as well. And what's really interesting too is that so many times it's our business colleagues that are coming to us and saying, hey, have you heard about this? Because people are so aware now. So I think IT is a great area to be in. I think it's, no 2 days are the same. That's what I love.
No. I assume there's probably multiple areas of IT. Can you still consider it IT in the purest sense, or is there, there's, the hardware side of IT, there's the cloud side of IT, there's a bit like you said, there's the large language models of IT. Is it still ubiquitous, the term? I'm asking you, somebody who clearly doesn't know.
Look, there is so many different silos within IT. What we're seeing of late is that they all sort of are morphing together a little bit more than what they used to. So you mentioned hardware. You've got your hardware asset management side of the world. You've got your software asset management side of the world. You've got accounting and finance within IT. It's often one of the biggest areas of spend for any organisation. So it's very well managed or very well looked at. You've got audit requirements, you've got security requirements, you've got application management. It just voice, video. Anything like that is changing over time. So I think it's I often look at IT as almost like its own organisation within an organisation. Yeah. I think the key there though is making sure that it is moving in the same direction as the organisation that it is supporting.
Yep.
And that's often the big challenge.
Yeah, keeping it connected to the strategy. And that's something that I know I see in my organisation is the way, IT's priorities over here and then some of the other business priorities over there. And you're like, how do we get these a bit more connected? Because they look like they're going, you want to get a bit of help to help a client, but the IT people are too busy, putting in an upgrade or something like that. And it's like, where's the balance here?
Yeah, and we do that really well where I work. But I think, just putting it back to the MBA too, I think it enables you to understand a bit more what the business need. Mm-hmm. Because even though, there was a few of us that went through my cohort that were involved in an IT business unit, if you like. And I think we all sort of realised very quickly that just how important it was to make sure that we knew what else was going on. And I think that is the key.
Yeah.
But like I say, we do it really well where we are.
Yeah. You touched very briefly on the concept of AI, and given you work with some cutting edge, people, programs, technology and all that sort of stuff, I'm just interested in your take on the AI situation at the moment with all the ChatGPTs and Bards and all that.
Look, I think it's exciting. I actually think it's exciting. I also think it's a little bit, for me personally, I'm a little bit scared. I had an interesting conversation with my kids actually the other day about AI, and one of them was planning to study commerce and had started sort of going down that path and said to me, look, Mum, I'm really worried because is AI going to take over my job? And we sat there for a minute and we tried to figure it out. And I don't know that we know the answer. I think there's, if you're going to study and be a nurse, for example, obviously nursing needs hands-on people to touch other people.
Yep.
We live in this world where we don't know what it's going to look like going forward. And I heard a really interesting discussion online I think it was a TED Talk or something, a couple of weeks ago about a lady who had set up a business that was editing. Mm-hmm. And she was saying that AI has already taken a lot of what she learnt to do and that she's actually turned around now, and instead of editing, she's teaching people how to use AI and ChatGPT, etc., to edit.
Wow.
So she's literally had to have that agility and that movement, and to make sure that she continues to have a role in her career. So I think what we need to do as we move forward is make sure that people and the kids and the generations coming up, and also ourselves as, more mature people, are continually willing to adapt and be agile to what the world is offering us. And I think that's going to be the key to making AI work.
Yeah. Yeah,
Work
it's definitely,
I should say.
yeah, it's such a good point. And I guess I don't have kids yet, so I can't put it into the context of what will the, some of the jobs look like, especially when it's as close to home as what your kids do and the, the profession and the career that they choose to take. So that's quite an interesting thought exercise. But like I sort of look at it and, I can think about what it's currently capable, like a ChatGPT, and how good it is at, synthesizing certain bits of information. When companies get good at connecting those within their entire networks or data, and you can literally, interrogate it with all of the information that exists, whether that's all your policies, all your sales data, all the information about all your employees, the power that will have, and I can imagine the impact that will have on organizations in terms of how it can get insights and make decisions. I think that is a really interesting, and that's just one tiny little, niche area of how those things will make an impact in organizations. But yeah, it's I agree, it's exciting.
It's exciting, and I think the key now is making sure that we all learn how to use it positively and how to adapt the outputs positively. And I think that's, probably the next big growth educational requirement that we're all going to have, regardless of if we want it or not. It's here.
Awesome. Well, I've taken up quite a bit of your time, Lisa. I'm going to ask you one last question. The MBA success staple. What does success mean to you?
Look, I think success for me is about. That's a really good question. Success for me is about feeling proud of where I am, and it's about setting a good example for others. I think that for me is success. I don't think there's a particular role or a particular monetary level or anything like that dictates success. I think if you're successful, you're happy, you're self-confident, and you're in a situation where you're able to help and guide other people to get there as well. And I think that to me is what success looks like.
Awesome.
Good question.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, and thanks for listening, all of our listeners. For any of you who are paying attention to our social media and our LinkedIn and our emails, we have our Graduate Management Awards, or what used to be called the Graduate Management Awards. It's now the MBA Australasia Awards for 2023. The nominations are open. The event will be hosted on the 26th of October in Melbourne. So, get your nominations in, entries close on September the 7th. So if you want to head to the website, you'll find more details there about that. But stay tuned to this. We will have also some member special exclusive content going up within our members section of our website as well for all of our members who are listening. So come in and have a look at that too. But again, Lisa, thank you very much for joining me.